Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. Today, I'm interviewing the Happy Lady. That's the name of her channel. And I'm going to put it in the description box below so you can check her out and then subscribe. Her name is Lindsay Reach. Her last name is pronounced Reach, in case you were wondering, like if you
Reach.
read it. Yeah. And so as some of you may have seen the video or not, you guys, there was a few videos ago that I was doing a search on YouTube and she popped up and I was like, what? I haven't heard of her before. And I wanted to talk to her because, as many of you know, there's been a big emphasis on President Kimball's prophecy about the women of right now being instrumental and being the ones that are bringing large numbers into the church. And so I've been interviewing many of you sisters that have wanted to start YouTube channels. Now, in the case of Lindsay, she's had one for a while and it's like really well established. It's large, but I still want to just, promote it. If you haven't heard of her, I know that we have a bunch of shared subscribers, but if you haven't heard of Lindsay before, then here you go. I'm going to put her under my featured channels. So for those that don't know you that are in my audience, Lindsay, what's your channel about? When did it start? And what kind of things do you touch on?
I'll give you the whole history.
Okay.
Get your popcorn. It started back in 2008. And the whole reason I started a channel was because I actually had published my first book called How to Date Your Spouse. Believe it or not, Chad Daybell was my publisher.
Chad Daybell?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
right.
he got it into Deseret Book. He got it into all national bookstores, so that was a good thing.
Yeah.
And I realized I needed a place where I could promote the book because I had some professional videos made for it, and I had gone on a national media book tour, and I had nowhere to put all these videos, and so I started a YouTube channel. So it actually used to be called Happy Marriages, and I finally realized a year ago I could change it. It didn't have to be called Happy Marriages anymore. So I changed it to the Happy Lady because that's what I go by. That's what people call me because I can't say my last name.
And you do look like a happy lady.
They're like, it's that lady. She's always happy. You know, that happy lady. So that's how the name started in my community where I live. But yeah, it started with the book. And then from there, so that was back in 2008, like right when YouTube started. So if you look at those old videos, they're so outdated. It's a little embarrassing. They're so old school, but they're still there. And then over the years, I'd come back to the channel because my in-laws are German, so they live in Germany, and we needed a place where we could put all of our family videos so they could keep track of our family and feel like they're included in our life. So I put together these family videos and just upload them there. And so we have that on the channel. That's mainly for family and friends. That seems to be who enjoys it. And then I think it was about, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I just had this dream. One day I woke up and it was a really profound dream. I talk about it in the first Happy Lady video. And it was basically me. I was flying in a car all across the United States, all over the world. And I had this giant megaphone and I was shouting through the megaphone all these positive things to uplift everybody on the earth. And when I woke up, I heard a distinct thought in my mind. It wasn't my own. And it basically said, you need to get on your YouTube channel and you need to share positive messages. And I started right away. I started doing that. I wasn't sure what that meant, what that would look like. So as you watch the evolution of my channel, you'll see how it's changed over the years with the Happy Lady playlist. They started out as just basic, short, like 5-minute videos. Today they're like 3 hours long. So I gotta change that. But yeah, you can just see how I've changed. I started out keeping it safe, talking about the science of happiness, tips to be happy. And then I thought, I want to be honest. What really makes me happy is the gospel, the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. That's why I get out of bed every day. So that's what I got to focus on. So I start moving more into the gospel. And then from there, it just kind of took off. And then it was about a few years ago, I do some other things. I just share anything that makes me happy or anything that I think people would want to know. So I think I did a video about acne for my son because we found a way to get rid of his acne. We were so excited. So we made a video about it. And that went viral. And right after that went viral, it was like, right around the time of the elections, my channel got censored. And so YouTube shut off all my comments, and I had this momentum going, and everything stopped, and it kind of has had a hard time recovering since then. They turned the comments on right after the elections were over. so so they all came back on, and it wasn't just my channel, it was a lot of channels. And so people can comment now, but it really, my channel really took a toll when they shut down the conversation. So that's the best part, of having a YouTube channel, is the conversation, the comments. And so we're going good. We've got the comments back on, and it's starting to pick up momentum again. But yeah, it's really just a place where you can come, hear uplifting videos. I talk about all kinds of things on my channel, but my favorite part are the happy lady videos, and I think that's what brings most people to my channel. So it's been great. I've met a lot of people over the years. I've had a lot of interesting experiences. I've had videos that there was a couple years where I kind of went undercover, and I did these research rabbit hole type videos. So I learned a lot, and that was pretty crazy. But yeah, now I'm just kind of focused on everything that's going on, events, things that are happening in the news, and how that applies to us with the gospel.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's
yeah.
pretty amazing. And I think that those in my audience that don't know you yet would be really interested in everything that you talked about. Um, I've talked about the fact that for whatever reason, it must just because our numbers are small compared to the rest of the world as a church, there aren't like a whole lot of LDS YouTubers. Like there's a lot, but
Mhm.
relatively speaking, no, there's not. And so those that are doing it I think are being used by the Lord in whatever way he sees fit, because those that are willing, he's going to use. And
Yeah.
I think that we need more, just because all these different inventions, starting all the way back with electricity, the telephone, transcontinental railroad, all these things, like they hasten the Lord's work and their tools given to us. And with the internet, like all you have to do is just pay basically for the internet, and then you can do YouTube. And so it's like we've been given this really powerful tool, and it's just like sitting in our lap. And so I understand that some people can't do it. Other people have lives, they have jobs, but anyone out there, again, if you're thinking about doing it, let me know. I will interview you and promote your channel, because I think we need more LDS voices. And then in your case, Lindsay, I just, it's funny because President Nelson, well, no, he was quoting Spencer W. Kimball, but he said that something to the effect, I'm paraphrasing, that the proportion to which people will join the church it'll be proportional to the women of the church and how they're distinct from the women of the world in happy ways. And so that's like perfect with you. You're happy, and it
I
may
felt that
attract
from
women of
head
the
to
world.
toe.
What was that?
When you said that right now, I felt it again, but the first time I heard that, it was so profound. I felt like I'm feeling it right now. I just felt like this shower of warm water, like happy ways. That's it right there. That's what it's all about. And that's who I am.
Yeah.
So
The world is just getting so excuse me, getting so dark, and like the women of the world that are good and upright, they're not liking it, and it's
mhm.
going to be harder and harder to find wholesomeness, people that have the light of Christ in them, that have the spirit with them. And so just being a bright, shining example to the world, through the internet, I think the Lord can do a lot with that. So I think
Yeah.
that you're obviously doing a really good job. What are some of the rabbit holes that you've gone into on your channel?
Yeah. So I I've done quite a few. I think the ones that bring the most people to my channel, they seem to find those videos, and then it pulls them into the happy parts of my channel. But there was a time when some of them are controversial. So I always hope that the viewers who are watching understand what it is, what my intentions are. Um, but yes, it was a few years ago where I had been involved with a lot of people who had found my channel, a lot of groups. I'd been invited to conferences and just met a lot of people throughout that year. And I was involved in an organization which was really awesome. The whole purpose of it was to bring people from different faiths together to kind of show everybody that we can build bridges. Even though we go to different churches, we can all still join together and bring people to Christ. So I was a part of this organization, And there were people that I met through that organization. A lot of them here in Utah, some in Idaho, some in Missouri. And during that whole year, it was quite the roller coaster. It was amazing and awesome, and I met a lot of people. But then, you know that talk by Elder Holland? I forget what it's called, but it's where he talks about. I'm feeling it right now. I say that a lot. I'm sorry. I'm just feeling those spirit bumps. He talks about how he's in a truck going down this road with his son, right? And there's a fork in the road. Should we go left? Should we go right? And so they decide to go right because that's what felt right at the time. It felt good to go right. And they get so far down the road and suddenly there's a dead end. And so they have to turn around, go all the way back and go to the left side. And his son says, why did we feel good about going right if that was the wrong way? And Elder Holland said, that's a good question. And he said, I believe it's because the Lord sometimes will let us go so far in the wrong direction so that we have a firm testimony that that was the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. That's what happened to me. So I had good intentions. I met a lot of amazing people, and a lot of them were good members in the church. So I had a lot of trust in a lot of these people. And I started to find out as they would invite me to things that they were a part of, they were doing things that I just felt were leading people off of the path, but they were justifying that it wasn't, that it was, something that would help people graduate from the path and go on to something better. And it was awful what I was witnessing. And so in that moment, I had a choice. I can just walk away right now, or I can get to the root and see why this is happening, what's going on here. And then I can kind of expose it without saying names, without saying who these people are, but let people know what's going on. So I went for another month or so to some of these events and kept getting emails and staying in touch with these people. And then when it got to be too much, there was a day when the straw just finally broke the camel's back. And I'm like, oh, this is not good. And I went and I talk about it in the video. I went and I prayed, and it was this overwhelming feeling that this is not okay. What these people are doing is not okay. And I prayed about one name very specifically, is this person okay? Is what I'm feeling right? Craziest thing happened right after I said that prayer. My phone rings, and it's a lady in my stake who I don't even know that well. She felt to call me in that moment, and she started talking about that very lady who doesn't even live near us, who lives hours away. And she said, I just felt like I was supposed to call you. I know you have this YouTube channel, and I was supposed to call you and talk about this lady that our family knows. She's the reason my mother-in-law passed away. And she tells me this crazy story about this group of people who pulled her mom off of the covenant path to where her mom sold her house, gave up everything, got rid of everything, gave all her money to these people. They pulled her away from her family and her children, and then she got cancer, and they told her as this tumor was growing that it wasn't a tumor, that she was pregnant with an angel, or what was it, like the child of the Holy Ghost, or it was something outrageous. And she believed them so much that she never went to the doctor, and then the cancer killed her. And I just was so sick to my stomach when I heard the story, and it was a huge confirmation that these are the fruits of what these people are doing, and it's not okay. And so I did a video about it, and it ties into so many things. It ties into not just these random offshoots of people that have their own ideas, but it ties into people of other faiths and churches that are also pulling people off the path because of amazing miracles and things that are happening. And then energy work, that was a huge part of it. Is up where I lived at the time, energy work was this huge craze. It was kind of the newest thing. People were trying to figure out what it was. And I met a lot of people in that world and saw a lot of crazy things happen. And so that whole video series I did, it's called Hold to the Iron Rod, part 1, part 2, and part 3. It just exposes all of it. And when that video first came out, I got both responses. I got people who were extremely happy, like, yes, finally somebody said what needed to be said. And then I got people on the very opposite end who were offended and upset. But what's funny is about a year later, those people who were offended and upset reached out to me and said, I'm so sorry. I get what you're talking about now. It just took me a year to get there. That's usually what happens. And so that's just one of them. But I've done quite a few others. And I don't know, it's kind of just the hard truths that need to be said.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes people are afraid to talk about it, but when you talk about it, I feel like the Lord sends people your way who need to hear it. So I don't promote the videos, but people who need to hear it usually find them, and then they reach out to me and say, that's exactly what I needed to hear. I was just praying, I was just fasting to know if this was okay, and I found your video. So
You know, it's so weird because at the very beginning of my channel, I had kind of an experience with like this topic, the energy work. Like there, I'm not going to go through the whole story, but I was kind of like doing my own little thing about like going through ensigns, like, hey, look, this kind of stuff is not good, and look what it says in the church handbook, and
mhm.
um, because like I noticed that it had taken hold of like a bunch of it's weird. It's just weird how
Yeah.
things like that just like pop up. It's like a kind of like like a sickness that like takes hold and then it starts to like spread. It's just weird. And you know, there's all sorts of things that can take you off the covenant path, but it could be things like this where when President Nelson says that in the future we're not going to be able to survive spiritually unless we have the constant guidance of the Holy Ghost and we can receive personal revelation. It's things like this that are dangerous. Not only this, it's lots of things. It's like popular philosophies of men. There's all sorts of
Mhm.
deceivers and people that have agendas out there. But I think that that's like a really good example of how to sort that out, because you prayed specifically about that one individual. And I'm sure that you've heard it before that like when our prayers are more on the specific side, as specific as possible, it's like they're more effective. And so maybe anyone out there that's watching this, if you have questions about an individual that you're watching or following or reading or listening to, and you're kind of like feel like something might be off, maybe say a prayer about it, and then you'll have
Mhm.
a similar experience to what Lindsay had. It's
Can
really
I share
scary.
something? It just came to mind, so maybe somebody needs to hear it. So during that whole experience, it's hard because I don't want to say names, but I feel like when I describe these people, people are going to know who they are. So it's really hard because I don't want to put anybody, you know what I mean? I just don't want to say names. But
Yeah.
I have a friend, so I'm still friends with some of these people because some of these people I feel like corrected their ways and kind of just needed a wake up call, but other people, those were not their intentions. They knew what they were doing and they're still doing that. And so I cut ties with those people. There is an individual who I still sort of keep in touch with off and on, a member of another church, a minister of another church. And he was very well known in our community. He would come out to Utah all the time. His publisher is here in Utah, an LDS publisher, well known publisher, and he was like interviewed on BYU TV. He had a lot of speaking engagements out here, and I saw him speak. I'd never heard of him before. I was amazed with what he shared. I bought his books. We became friends, and we did a lot of things together along the way. And it was crazy because a lot of people would say, but you love the Book of Mormon. Your whole talk, everything you speak about, everything you write about is how you love the Book of Mormon. You know it's true. Why haven't you joined the church? Why are you still a minister of another church, another religion? And he would say, the publisher would support him in this and say, well, he feels like he has this special, unique mission where he can do more good and bring more people to the Book of Mormon by not being a member. People will take him more seriously in the Bible Belt and in those places, knowing that he's a minister of their faith, right? But that he believes the Book of Mormon, and so it works. And maybe one day he'll join. And but for now, this is what the Lord's having him do. And so everybody kind of felt weird about that, but they're like, okay, I guess that makes sense. Well, after a whole year or longer of knowing him, somebody reached out to me one day who follows my channel, and I had been making videos about what we were doing with his organization, and kind of said, I know this man. He used to be friends with my husband and I, and there's some things you should know. And the most important being that he used to be a member of the church. He went through the temple with his wife. He had the Melchizedek priesthood, and he's deceiving people because he doesn't tell anybody that. And he left the church. My jaw dropped. And in that moment, I felt like, oh my gosh. First, I didn't believe this lady because I didn't know her. And I thought, well, I don't know who this lady is. I've known this man for quite a while. Surely I would know that, right? And it just, you know, something's worth looking into and praying about when it doesn't leave your mind. For days and days, that just sat on my mind, and I felt so odd about it. So I reached out to him and I confronted him directly and said, "Is this true?" And it took him a while, but he wrote back and he said, "Yes, but please don't tell anybody because it will ruin what I'm trying to do." And that was the same week I prayed the prayer about the other person, and so much more. It all just kind of hit me at once that there's all these people walking amongst the members of the church who say they're one thing, but they're not. Kind of like wolves in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
Maybe their intentions are all different. Some of them have a good heart and justify, well, it's kind of okay when I'm doing like a white lie. It's okay because I'm bringing people to the Book of Mormon, or it's okay because I'm helping people forgive and heal, right? But it's not okay because they're pulling people off of the path. So here's a fruit of what had happened. So this is why I bring this up. After I confronted him and he confessed to all of it and said, "Please just don't tell anybody. It'll mess up what I'm doing." I couldn't not tell anybody. And I said, "I don't agree with this. This is not okay. People think that you are going to one day join the church and you've already received those covenants and gone to the temple and then you chose to leave it. I feel like you're deceiving our people, like members of this church." And I'm not, I don't feel good about that. I can't be a part of that. So I broke off ties with him. But he's a super kind person, and he apologized and felt bad. And so we do stay in touch every now and then through Facebook, but that's about it. But anyways, because of all the people he had influenced where he lives, I had somebody from where he lives call me one day and said, "Hey, can I do a Zoom call with you? I've got the stake president in, I can't remember, Australia or New Zealand, and he's got some questions. And he found out I knew the happy lady, so he'd like to ask you these questions in a Zoom call. I'll be there to mediate." And I was like, "Sure, why not?" So we get on this call, and then my jaw drops when I found out what it was he wanted to talk about. The stake president told me that he had an appointment with this man to anoint him with special gifts, because this man had the keys to give him special gifts like being a seer, things that he would need because he believed he was about to be called as the stake patriarch. And he said, "I'm really worried. I feel like I'm about to be called as the stake patriarch. How am I going to be able to give these patriarchal blessings if I don't have this gift of being a seer and this gift of," he just went on and on. "I've got to get that. And I know this man has it. So he's going to give me that anointing through a Zoom call. And I want to talk to you first because you know this man. And he's going to give me the gift of tongues." And he listed all these gifts, and I just couldn't believe it. So I told him in that moment, "No, I don't do that." I said, "The only keys are right here in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We have the restored keys, not this man. They're right here. And if you are given that calling, the minute you're set apart for it, that mantle falls upon you and you'll receive the gifts that you need to do your calling. And if you don't believe in that, I can't help you." And he was so disappointed. That's not what he thought I would say. And I just steered him clear of that. And I don't know if it worked, but the call ended a lot sooner than he thought it would, because he
Yeah.
realized I wasn't about that. But to see that a stake president was going to these people to get gifts to help him do his calling in our church, I was like, "You've got to be kidding me." I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it. So that's why I share that with you. Is I feel like this happens a lot more than we realize, and it's something we just don't talk about, but it's kind of a big deal.
Oh yeah, that's a huge deal. You know, well, of course we should always still support our bishops and leaders, but they are susceptible, and like it's not on you if whatever it is that they do that's wrong. But yeah, we should definitely be mindful of these things. And as far as like these people go that are do these offshoots or do these kind of weird things, sometimes I think in some cases it may just be genuine, like mental
Mhm.
illness, like psychosis may be involved. So um
You can
because
have
it can be
compassion.
kind of deceiving, like when you feel that someone is like a good person, and in the mind of like a schizophrenic or somebody that's dealing with psychosis, like they genuinely are a good person, but they're
Mhm.
dealing with mental illness. In other cases, I think it's more narcissistic, possibly psychopathic, like toxic people that are simply looking for attention, control, a following, praise, whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
Um, so who knows? I guess it doesn't really matter why it's happening, because it doesn't matter if they're good-hearted, if they're genuine, or if they're knowingly fake. What really matters is that we do not follow things that are not right. And the biggest thing that we can do to prevent that is prayer, praying about these specific people, and listening to the prophet, reading the
Mhm.
scriptures, because I feel like I've heard a few times in general conference, at least across a few different years, where they talk about like when you're kind of confused about something, if you feel like you might be receiving revelation or something like that, you want to make sure that it conforms to what has already been revealed and
Mhm.
doesn't contradict the scriptures. It doesn't contradict the teachings of the church. And so that's like why with energy healing, uh, that should, I would hope that should set off some alarm bells, because it's like that's not something that our church teaches. In fact, if anything, our church goes against those kind of like occultic, esoteric
Mhm.
thing that, well, especially witchcraft or sorcery or things like that. You
Right.
know, so basically, if it's not like openly accepted by the church, I would heavily question that. And again, we have the internet, which makes it so much easier now than it was like in the 90s or 80s, when it was still in its infancy, to look up the answers to our questions, like in within church materials, like to go back to, you find an Ensign article or you find a general conference talk that talks about the issue that you have a question about. And so it's a lot easier now to find out what the church has said, and then of course the scriptures too. It's easier to search these things. So
Mhm.
pray, search, and then I think that you won't be led, even though it can be pretty deceiving.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I think too, the biggest thing that seems to pull people in those directions is they just want to feel good. And I've seen with a lot of these philosophies and groups, it's all about you and putting you on a pedestal and making you feel amazing and you're the center of the universe. And you add with that these miracles. I mean, the things I've witnessed, I couldn't believe it in the beginning. And I thought, what is this? I saw broken legs healed. I mean, I saw stuff happening right in front of me. And I'm like, this isn't the priesthood. What is this? I was so confused years ago. And these were people that I know, that I respect, that are, members of the church. And so I at the time, I just was trying to figure out, what is this? I couldn't wrap my mind around it. And so I think when people see things like that, coupled with just helping you just feel amazing, and your truth, your own your own truth, your new identity. Everybody's a self healer, and I can just see why that's so enticing. And if you don't have a strong testimony, and you're not rooted in the gospel, and you don't know the doctrine, it's really easy to get pulled that direction. But you can feel just as good in the restored gospel of Jesus Christ here in the church. You can feel amazing, and you can have experiences that are amazing through the Spirit and through the priesthood. And we've seen that too. So I think people kind of just forget, and they see these bright, sparkly packages off the path, and they just want to go check it out and see what it is. And then it just kind of pulls them in. And so I think that's why it was emphasized at conference. It's all about your testimony. You've got to have a testimony. Now is the time to have a testimony more than ever. And we can see why.
Yeah. With that whole idea of like telling you um how great you are, putting yourself up on a, or putting you on a pedestal, you need to take care of yourself, you need to be happy, care about you. um I think that falls under the category, like when you're reading in the scriptures, when it talks about flattering words, how like
Mhm.
these like antichrist types will tell you things that flatter you. They're flattering you and making you feel good about yourself, in order that they might, again, have attention, control, whatever it is that they're trying to do. um People are a lot more likely to listen to you if you're telling them what they want to hear, essentially.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And it's funny,
Yeah.
like when it comes to like healing in the church, like yeah, there's healing, but it's not 'cause I'm not like familiar very much with like energy healing practices. But you mentioned something about like you have they say that you have the power of like self-healing, something to that effect.
Mhm.
And in the church, that's not really how it is. Like you can pray, but you can receive blessings from somebody else, and they lay their hands upon your head, and it's not that they're doing the healing, but it's like instead of like having that self focus, like I heal myself, you receive healing from another source, a divine source with the help of others. So that's kind of like an interesting contrast. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know like what your feelings are. Uh, since I started this channel, like whenever I watch General Conference, I'll do a live stream after each session, which which is a little bit exhausting, but it's also really good. And with this last conference, there were a lot of people that felt that it was pretty different. Like the feelings were really strong. Um, the things that were said. What was your perception of this conference, and what are some of the things that you took away from it?
Yeah. Okay, I've got my notes right here.
Oh, good.
I love my notes. I felt this conference was one of the most amazing conferences I've witnessed so far in my, how old am I? 41 years of life.
And wait, and let me ask you this: have you always been a member of the church?
I have.
Okay, and also this, I just because I'm geographically minded. If you don't mind, like where in Utah are you, or like roughly where are you?
Yeah, I am in Davis County, up in, with my Davis County accent. I'm up in Layton. And I'm out in West Layton, and I grew up in Sandy. So I grew up in Salt Lake County, but I've lived up in Davis County, oh my gosh, ever since before I was married, over 20, probably 23 years or so. So I love
Okay,
it up here. But yeah,
all right. Yeah, I
these are
grew up
some
in the
great
Salt Lake Valley
people. It's
too.
like
I'm
the
from
salt of the earth.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
from Murray, and I've been to Sandy many times. What, honey?
Oh,
Oh, and my wife, yeah, she was in Sandy for a while when she was growing up. Not the whole time, but okay.
yeah.
Anyway, what are your takeaways from conference?
Yeah, I was blown away by this conference. And it's funny because I know you feel that way generally going into every conference. You feel like, oh, this is going to be a good conference. I can just feel it, right?
Hmm.
And after every conference is over, you say, oh, that was a good conference. But there was something so unique and different and special about this conference. And it's funny because I couldn't quite place my finger on it. I could only just write down how I felt. And I knew we had witnessed something amazing. And it wasn't until Wendy Nelson's Canadian devotional where she addressed that and said, did you know we had over 200 million people tuning into that conference? That's never happened before. And I thought about that for a minute because I just done a video. I just been talking about how many members we have in the church. And I was like, wait a minute, we've got 17 million members. And
Yeah.
not all of those members were tuning in. Who are the other people? Who are those other millions? And so that right there told me this is something special. And then when she talked about all the opposition that they faced going into it, it made you think, why? Why would the adversary not want all of these people hearing what was said? Which made me want to go back and read it again and again and listen to the talks again to hear what it was that the adversary didn't want people to hear. So that was confirmation that this was indeed a monumental conference. And I always divide up the sessions into themes. So after they're over, I'm like, okay, what was the takeaway theme from all of these speakers? Because it generally feels like they're grouped together. They're
Mhm.
organized, so they're kind of covering the same topics. And I felt like the biggest theme for me was forgiveness, that the Lord is trying to prepare people to meet the Savior when he comes. We're not quite there yet. So we've got a lot of work to do on our hearts. There's a lot of focus on forgiveness, and then of course a lot of focus on covenants, which kind of seems to be a repeating message because it's so important, not just to get on the covenant path, but to stay there. And so there's power in the covenants and there's power in forgiveness. And so they kind of go together. And I took away so much. And you think about it, you're like, well, forgiveness is something we hear about all the time. There's nothing new to learn about that. But I'm telling you, every time the leaders speak about something that we hear all the time, I always get something new out of it, something profound. And I felt like that happened this time.
You know,
And
the interesting thing about what you're saying, because like in that same devotional, she put up on the screen what her friend said about President Nelson. We feel like he just asked us to get on the ark. And essentially, between all the different talks and stuff that I've heard, it really seems like the way that you get on the ark is being on the covenant path. Like that
Yeah.
is the ark, being in your temple covenants. And then when it comes to forgiveness, one thing that I always took very seriously since I was really young is when I read the New Testament and uh hearing the promises of like when you forgive others, the Lord will forgive you. It's like really important that you forgive others. Otherwise, if you don't forgive others, the Lord's not going to forgive you. And so I always kind of like, okay, you know, I'm not perfect. I really need to make sure I'm forgiving others and not hold grudges. And I don't know how much that'll play into the second coming, but it seems kind of like more like a final judgment type thing, but it could play into the second coming in a way, because we know that
Mhm.
not everyone's moving forward into the millennium. If you're living a telestial law, um, you're not going. You at least have to have terrestrial or celestial. But I think we would do well to forgive others. And another thing that they're really pushing for is for us to be a Zion people, to
Mhm.
um, get rid of contention, be of one heart, one mind, and things like that. So anyway, that was my thought about when you were talking about forgiveness. So anyway, okay, and what else did you pick up? What are your other notes?
Yeah. So, like you said, contention, that's kind of what President Nelson started out with at the beginning of conference, was letting us know. I like how he said contention violates the Savior's teachings. And it's totally 100% true.
Yep.
And it was kind of repeated: contention, peace. We've got to have peace. We've got to get away from contention. So that, I know that's something we all know, but just hearing it come from a prophet's mouth makes you really want to do all that you can to avoid contention at any cost. So,
And
which
there's
I've
so
just
much
heard.
contention right now, so much arguing about politics and social issues and the pandemic, and just like so much contention. Like we cannot fall into that trap.
Yeah, yeah, it's awful. It's not a good feeling. And yeah, that's why I always try to focus on what we have in common. When I come across people and I can feel that we've got these strong differences, I try to focus on what we have in common, because I feel like that's how we can connect and unite. And you just kind of want to find common ground and have that unity so you can have that peace. And I try to do that every day. It's sometimes hard, but it's totally worth it. It's totally worth it if you can do it. So
Yeah.
um,
I was
I
thinking
heard a
about
lot.
like with my kids, because like it's actually gotten a lot better. They've grown up and they're doing better with it. But like there was always just like times where there'd be fighting, and it's like I've tried to like teach them like, look, it's like a pond. You want a nice still pond. You want equilibrium, because like when there's like fighting, it, the more you like dig in, or the more you fight, it just gets more and more chaotic, and you want to do what you can to help calm it back down and just be just peace. And so yeah, I think that's what like we should definitely do is try and just find common ground, because that stabilizes the situation and brings peace.
Yeah, and I feel like I feel like we get more wrinkles when we're angry. So I
Yeah.
mean, just it's worth it to be happy. So
Yeah.
yeah, I noticed a repeating message. I kept hearing, I highlight patterns, and I heard a lot of reference to the great and spacious building. So that was something else that kept coming up, which we're just seeing a lot of people. Like you said, there's so many different things that pull people off the path, and it's all lies and distractions from the adversary. So it comes packaged differently, but it's all with the same purpose. And I noticed that if it's not these other things, these distractions and philosophies and things, it's just the world. It's just wanting that approval from the world, and kind of like FOMO. You feel like you're missing out on what the world's doing. And so the great and spacious building reminds me of that. It also reminds me of the Tower of Babel. It's Babel, right? We all say it
Mhm.
different.
Yeah, that's how I say it.
Tower of Babel. And there's been a lot of references to that lately. People talking about Babylon and reviving Babylon, and so that always reminds me of the great and spacious building. It's the world. And so there's a lot of reminders about that we don't want to be on the path that's leading to the great and spacious building. We want to be holding to the iron rod. That's the covenant path that leads to Christ. So that was huge. That was all throughout conference. And then there was a talk by, actually, That's funny. My page is flipped, and I'm in April conference. so, so I think that was a big part of the April conference, but I know I heard it again this time around.
Yeah.
But there was also in this conference, there was a lot of references to 3rd Nephi chapter 11. So Elder Brasband referenced that. And then, of course, President Nelson ended conference with the video clip from the Book of Mormon series of 3rd Nephi chapter 11. That's a number I always see. So people who follow my channel are like, what is it with this 311? You always see this 311. And lately I'm like, it's 3rd Nephi chapter 11. It's because these are things that are pointing us to become like the people in 3rd Nephi chapter 11. Those were people who were ready to meet the Savior when he came. So
That's interesting that you say that, because I don't know if you caught the devotional with Sherry Dew. It was like, was it this last week? She was talking about how President Nelson's give thanks message in 2020, how he specified an exact day, a length of the video, which flew against the conventional wisdom of what would be good for putting out a message. And this gets a little bit more on the deeper side. Some people don't like to talk about this, but it's been noted that his the length of the message was 11 minutes long. It was done during the 11th month of the year, November. And then wasn't there another 11?
There was a lot.
Yeah. What was that? No, it was on the 20th. It was on a Friday. My wife's over there for anyone that doesn't. I'm not talking to a ghost. Anyway, 11's, I actually did a video about it, and I don't know the exact meaning, symbolism. It doesn't seem like there really is one in the church necessarily, but it seems like it's important. And so it's just that's what I thought about when you said that about 311.
I see 11s all the time. And so I remember when that gratitude message came out and we all noticed those 11s. I did a video about it, and I'll have to go find it. I have so many videos, and they're not all labeled well. Your videos are labeled amazing, by the way. you know what
thank you.
When you read your video titles. Mine are not quite. So I know I did a video all about those 11s, and leading up to that video, years leading up to that, I see 11 all the time. So that was amazing. So people reached out to me. They're like, oh, this message he gave us all about 11s. You always see the number 11. And I've always just said on my channel, to me, it just reminds me of the 11th hour, that we're in the last seconds of the 11th hour. And I just talked about this in my video this last week. I don't know if you knew this. It's totally secular, but it ties into this. I always feel like things that are going on in the news and even pop culture have some symbolism. There's always kind of a message in that. And Taylor Swift had an album that just came out called Midnights. It's actually plural. And when it first came out, my son, he's a musician, so he was talking about it, and I kind of heard him say something about a record. And I didn't even hear the name of the album, but I was like, oh, she has a record. Oh, that's cool. Well, it popped up on my news feed that week that her record was called Midnights, and that it broke world records that week, as far as it was the first album ever in the history of albums to be streamed among all streaming services worldwide. It was the most streamed album of all time within a week. It just topped all of the other artists and albums throughout all the history of streaming services. So that stood out to me, and I'm like, okay, pay attention. The keyword there is midnight. Oh, midnight, right? Well, then a week later, it pops up again on my news, and it said another record with this album. She's the first artist ever to take up all the first top 10 spots in the Billboard Hot 100. Oh. Every number 1, number 2, number 3, it was all Taylor Swift from the album Midnight. To me, again, that's huge. It's pay attention. And the keyword there again is midnight. And then President Nelson is saying it's, time to board the ark. And so I'm hearing in my mind, it's time to board the ark because it's midnight. And when you think about that and you go back and read the conference talks, it has even more of a profound meaning. When you hear these things and you're like, oh, it's just regurgitated topics that we always hear about in conference. And it's like, no, this time it was different. This time it really meant something. So.
And I know that for a fact, because I don't know how familiar you are with my channel, if at all. But I do this phrase tracker where BYU has this website called the Scripture Citation Index, and you can search, among many other things, you can search general conference talks, and you can look for specific words and phrases. And so I did this spreadsheet, and I tallied up the number of talks that use these different words and phrases, the ones that have to do with the second coming. And I can tell you, as a matter of fact, that when it comes to all these different phrases, there's usually a big spike in the 70s. And then the only other time that you see anything close, and a lot of times it actually dwarfs it, is within the last few years. So yeah, I think some people that aren't really paying attention, they're just kind of like, oh, conference is always the same. It's just like good messages. But no, the words that they are using, there are definitely themes, and there's definitely a higher frequency of talking about the second coming these last few years. You don't even really have to put together a tracker to know that, but when you do, you kind of like see some really interesting things that are said, and things that have not been said for decades. Um, when it comes to pop culture, I'm like-minded with you, because I've thought about, because I feel like the adversary knows more or less also the time that we're in. And I think that,
Mhm.
like, for whatever reason, he's able to influence things and put things into pop culture. Uh, Not that all pop culture is inspired necessarily by him, but probably a lot of it is. But like, I've thought about like Linkin Park, they did the Minutes to Midnight. That was toward like the beginning of this millennium, but they did that. The Marvel movies are very, very almost like second coming themed. And usually the way that they make it seem is that Christ, or the one that's like metaphorically Christ, is always the bad guy in those movies. Um,
Mhm.
there's been like a lot of things like on my TV, like, how it'll show you like, oh, this is new on Netflix, this is new on Disney Plus. There's just been a lot of things like that, like Bill Nye the Science Guy, he has like a thing that's called The End Is Nigh. There's also a new movie that came out, I think it was like last year, I'm not sure, called Don't Look Up. It's rated R. I haven't, but it's about a world-ending event, and how like the
Mhm.
world is not paying attention to it. There's these two scientists that are the ones that discovered it. They're like, hey, we got to tell somebody about this because it's going to end the world. And just like everybody's caught up in their own business, and the president won't listen, the media won't listen. So
Yeah.
I feel like I feel like they do know kind of what time it's in. And but anyway, these numbers, yeah, I think you're right with the 11, and it's the 11th hour. What were your feelings about, like, did you, in his main talk, he said, he basically called on us to be the people of the second coming. He said that one of the
Mhm.
main reasons for the gathering of Israel is to prepare people that are ready and able to receive Christ when he comes. And then he pauses and he's like, I call upon you to be this righteous people. And he like smiles as he said it. Did you catch that, or did
Yeah,
you have any
yeah,
thoughts
I
about that?
did. Yeah, I think we all felt that in our spirit, and that's when we're like, "Oh, this conference, this is amazing." Sorry, the jets are flying over from Hill Air Force Base.
Oh,
I don't
that's
know if you
okay.
can hear that. It's hard to hear myself talk, but I trust you can hear. Um, so yes, I I got that feeling all through, especially from Elder Bednar's talk. He's telling us, if you're going to be at this wedding, you've got to be this people. And here's what these people do: they wear the wedding garment, right? We have to be these people, and they told us all how to do it. I mean, the formula is so simple. And if we're keeping our covenants and staying on the path, we're going to be at the wedding. We're going to be there. So, but yeah, it was amazing how the way he mentioned that, the way he said it, and just the look on his face. If you if you listen to conference and you watch President Nelson's mannerisms and his face expressions, you just feel it. There's
Yeah.
times when he'll kind of just look up, and you just want to know what it is he's seeing, and you just feel it, that he knows something, he sees something, and he wants us to be a part of that. And I think that's why he showed us the clip from 3rd Nephi chapter 11. He does that. Sister Nelson does it too. They'll kind of just put these things in their talks and kind of let us figure it out. It's kind of just there. Like the piano piece that she showed at the Canadian devotional, she just kind of cut the scene and she's like, oh, and if you came into our home, President Nelson would probably play something like this for you. And I remember watching him play that, and I thought, well, that's kind of a melancholy song. President Nelson's a pretty happy guy. He's a pretty happy prophet. And the song is kind of sad. So what's up with that? And then I found out shortly after from my friend who's a theater um, expert. She said, "You don't know what song that is. You don't know, you've never heard that?" And I said, "No, but it was sad." And she said, "That's the theme song from Schindler's List." And I thought, oh, I've never even seen that movie, so but I know what it's about, and it's called. I hope I can get it right. I could have done more.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah, I could have done more.
Well, yeah, I think it's yeah, it's basically that.
Something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. And when I thought about, I talked about this in a video, when I thought about getting on the ark, and you have two perspectives. You have the ark who's floating away and all the people are on the ark. And then you have the people who are on land who are watching this ark float away and they're seeing the rain come down. And you can hear two parts of the conversation, or two sides of the two perspectives. You have the people looking back, looking at the people left behind, saying, I could have done more. I could have done more to help them. I could have done more to serve, to minister. I could have put more names in the temple. I could have done more temple work, right? In my own family tree. I could have done more. And then you have the people watching the ark float away and they're thinking, we should have listened. We should have listened. And that was powerful. And I felt that theme throughout conference. When they kept bringing up eyes to see and ears to hear. Who was it? Was it Elder Bednar that said something like, I bless you, or pray that you'll have eyes to see and ears to hear? We heard it a couple times. And that's what it is right there. You don't want to be the people watching the ark float away. You want to be on the ark, but you also don't want to be on the ark looking back in hindsight with regrets, feeling like I could have done more. I could have spent less time on Instagram. I could have, I could have shifted my priorities better. And I feel like Sister Nelson nailed that. She just spoke to the Nevada Saints on Sunday, and that was a big part of her message was you gotta reprioritize your time and put the temple first and put the Lord first every day, and everything else will fall into place. So
Yeah, because I guess there's kind of two sides to it. And really, well, yeah, really what it comes down to is gathering scattered Israel on both sides of the veil. Because one, yes, for the people that are living right now, have you done what you can to invite people to church, or just share your testimony, things like that? Have you missed any of those opportunities because you don't want them to be among the people that don't make it into the millennium? But secondly, um, the people on the other side of the veil, in order to be resurrected, you have, like, the way I understand it, you have to have your work done first, because that determines whether you're resurrected to a celestial glory. You can't be resurrected to a celestial glory unless you've accepted those covenants and had your work done for you. So there's probably going to be a lot of people that are sad that they're not able to get resurrected right away and be with Christ in the cloud when the resurrection and the quickening happens, because their work's not done. It'll happen at some point, but they're waiting and they want to be able to be resurrected right away. I'm sure that it's not fun waiting to have your body again after so long a time. So yeah, we really need to have our priorities straight, just like you said.
yeah.
When he ended the conference and he said, until we meet, may God be with you till we meet again. Did you have any feelings about that? Like, how do you read that? What do you think that was all about? Because he said it tearfully.
I started crying. I looked around, my husband was crying, some of my kids were crying. We're like, whoa, what just happened? We're all crying and we're all kind of embarrassed, trying to hide with, our adults don't want to look at each other. And I called my sister and she was crying too. In fact, I think I got on right after that because I was moved in such a way. I'm like, I have to process what I'm feeling. What just happened? Why am I feeling this way? And so I did a live video immediately after conference was over because I just had to talk about it. I just had to process it with other people. And there was a lot of thoughts surrounding, the way he closed out conference with his testimony. And that God be with you till you meet again. A lot of us associate that with like funerals, right? I remember when I was in high school and my grandpa passed away, and my grandma asked me if I would play that at the piano or at the funeral. And I don't know why I was terrified to do it. And I totally slaughtered the song and messed it up, but I just said it's because I was so upset and I was crying, which was kind of true. But every time I hear that song, I think of my grandpa's funeral, and I think of those feelings of parting and not seeing someone till, the other side of the veil till you cross over. And so I think a lot of people were saying, well, what was going on there? Was he saying goodbye to us? And I know that was a lot of people were feeling that way. And then there was also another school of thought that no, maybe he was seeing the people that were getting on the ark and the ark sailing away, and he was thinking of all the people who weren't on the ark. And God be with you till we meet again, right? Things are about to happen, and it's not going to be easy. And I'm sure, even though he's a prophet and he knows and he sees things, he still is like you and I. He has a heart, and he feels just like the Savior. He feels our pain, he feels our sadness, and I'm sure he's seen things that are troubling and just pull at your heartstrings when you love a people, the people that you preside over, and you know that a lot of them aren't going to choose to get on the ark. They're not going to choose to do that. And I imagine that's how Noah felt, right? He knew what was about to happen. He watched it happen. I'm sure he didn't just, downplay that and forget about it the next day. I'm sure that stuck with him. And I feel like that's probably what might have been going on there. I know people were talking about how President Nelson looked. He mentioned his age. He's like, yes, you probably noticed I'm sitting in a chair or I need some help, but that's what happens as you age. But then I saw him at the Canadian devotional and the Nevada devotional, and he looks robust and healthy. He didn't need any assistance. And then when Sister Nelson said that they encountered some personal attacks and people risked their life to be at this conference to give their messages, things start going through your mind. Did something happen to President Nelson? Was he attacked physically? Was that why he needed to be in a chair? And this is something he isn't going to talk about. And whether or not that's true or not, it's what is true is the adversary is going out full force right now. There isn't anything stopping him from doing what he can to stop this from going forth, right? From the work going forth. And he's working really hard. But why is he working hard? Because he always counters everything that the Lord is doing. And as we see the Lord kind of finalizing the details on building the kingdom, as we see all this awesome stuff happening in the church, Satan's well aware of that, and he's trying to compete with that and counter that. And so he's working just as hard. And I think we're at that point now where it's almost midnight. It reminds me of Cinderella. I talked about that in a recent video, the comparison of Cinderella with the restored gospel and the timeline. And it just feels like we're about there. And there's only so much you can say, right? As a prophet, kind of like parents, there's only so much we can say to try to get our kids to listen and follow the rules. But at the end of the day, they're going to do what they want to do. They've got their agency. And it makes us sad because we love them, but there's only so much we can do because we're not going to force them. And so I feel like we're at that point where you've made your decision, right? You're either on the path or you're not. And it's all about your heart too. You've got to have your heart right with the Lord. We have to be that people that are ready to meet him when he comes, which we were told. I know they said to the Nevada saints that you need to be a people prepared for your temple. So if you've got a temple being built in your area, you've got to do all that you can to prepare everyone around you to receive that temple. Why? Because essentially receiving a temple is receiving the Savior. It's receiving his covenants. That's what that is. And we see the temples going up all over the world right now. That's huge. More temples than we've ever seen in our lifetime at a rate that's just unprecedented. That's the word, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's huge. It's like a chess game. You think about a chess game and where you put those pieces on the chessboard. It's very strategic. There's a reason for that. And President Nelson has told us, our leaders have told us that wherever a temple goes up, there's power over that area. There's protection and power. And so we've got these temples spread out all over the world. And it's like, it's ready. Like I don't know. Should be exciting.
I tend to think that's why the Rome, Italy temple seemed to be such a big milestone. It was called a hinge point. All 15 showed up. It was clearly a big milestone.
Yes.
I think it has to do with that good influence and that how the power of darkness kind of lessens when there's a temple in that area. So gosh, it's just so, yeah, I noticed that same thing with the devotionals, that he looked just fine. He doesn't talk like a 98-year-old. He's not like slow. um he talks like he's just full of life and that he's just
Yeah.
fine. And so
Yeah.
I can only assume, and it is a big assumption, and we'll just see what actually happens. But between now and next conference, if there's a next conference,
Yeah.
we'll see what happens, because I
We'll
can't
see.
picture him saying that, um, and then us just moving on to the next conference. And it's like, oh, okay, he just did that for no. I feel like there was something to it, and yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure it has to do with what he can see. There's always the
Yeah.
people out there, that are like, no, because this and this has to happen first, and da 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 da. And
Just throw all that out the window.
I feel like, they're right that things have to happen. Like every prophecy has to be fulfilled. But what I don't agree with is necessarily some of their interpretations, because some things may seem obvious, like, oh, it has to happen this way,
Mhm.
but you don't know. And
You don't know. Yeah.
yeah,
I always tell people, because they ask me all the time, well, what do you think? And, what things have happened and what haven't. And I'm like, I don't even get caught up in that and worry about it. And I know it's important and it is exciting when you do see things happen, like the Euphrates River, and you're like, whoa, what just happened there? How did I not see that? You see these things happening and it's exciting. But at the same time, if you try to fit everything in a box and try to make it work to your own understanding, then you miss out on all the other stuff and you ignore your feelings. And I know people hate it when I talk about feelings. They're like, nah, I'm a facts person. It's got to be logic. It's got to make sense. It's got to fit scripture. For me, I'm like, I just go off what spirit puts in my heart. And if it feels right, it feels right. If it feels good, it feels good. Um, I just feel, you can kind of just feel it. You just feel that things are happening. You just feel it in your spirit that this is a big deal right now. Things are about to drastically change, like you said, between now and the next conference. Who knows what that means or what it's going to look like, but you feel it. You're just anticipating it. It's coming. And then with all of the crazy natural disasters, I mean, all the earthquakes lately, as of this week, continually every day I wake up and there's 2 or 3 more giant earthquakes on my phone. And yeah, it's just so many things happening, signs in the heavens, lots going on. And it's easy to get overwhelmed with it. And then it's also easy to get so used to it that it's not cool. It's not exciting. It's like, yeah, it is what it is. It happens all the time. But yeah, you just feel it. You can just feel that the Savior is the wedding's about to happen. Let's just put it that way. The wedding is about to happen.
I think
So, and
that's
that's
why
exciting.
Elder Bednar gave that talk, because
Mhm.
one thing that really stuck in my mind was the fact that he made sure to say, with a wedding back then, you'd get an invitation way in advance, which, if I was going to correlate that to now, I would say probably 1820, or when the gospel started to be restored. And then you get a reminder the day of the beginning of the festivities. And the fact that he said at this conference, and it was the talk right before President Nelson, when he calls on us to be the people of the second coming. And then the last talk of General Conference, he shows a visual depiction of Christ coming down out of the sky. And then he says, God, may God be with you till we meet again, through tearful, as he's tearful. It just, you put it all together. And I feel like if you do have eyes to see and ears to hear and a heart to feel, like, you kind of, it's like, yeah, all these prophecies, but how can you, I can't reconcile this with this. It seems like this is more real and this is actually happening. And maybe how I conceived of those things is not going to happen the way that I think, or it'll happen quicker, or just in a way that I don't think. It's
Yeah.
just, oh my gosh. I've never seen a time in my life where the church has been like this. These are the kind of things that I was hoping to see, like in the year 2000,
I was just gonna
1999.
say that. Yes.
I was always like, because I knew that President Hinckley was like, he was a big, like, kind of like a major prophet. There were so many things that happened while he was president. The conference center, the announcement of all the temples, and so many other things. And I was like, okay, well, it's we're going to the year 2000. It's the start of the new millennium. And every conference, I'd be like, what is he going to say? Is he going to say something?
Yes.
And not really. But now
Mhm.
those things that I was expecting from back then, they're being said, and frequently, and in pretty clear terms, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I know, and this is what the younger generation is experiencing. You know, we look at the conferences we had when we were younger, and they're a lot different. And then our kids, this younger generation, this is the norm for them. And so I always have to remind my kids, you don't understand how special this is. You don't understand how special you are, like your generation, because this is all you know. Let me tell you about when I was a kid. It was totally different. And I have to help them recognize that so they get it, why this is so unique. Because to them, it's like, oh, you know, this is what it is. This is what we're used to. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely changed a lot, and you can feel it for sure.
Yeah. I think there's something significant to the number of temples that have been announced, because I actually just did a video yesterday where I went back to the year. It was actually 1998, but President Hinckley announced the most temples that have ever been announced in one time, where he basically said, we're announcing 30 temples, possibly 32. He's like, we better announce two more temples to make it an even 100, so that we have 100 operating temples by the year 2000. So that stuck out because I had noticed that this year in April conference, President Nelson announced 17, which
Mhm.
completed 100 temples that he himself had announced, which I was like, wow, that is crazy. And then this conference, he announced 18, which completed 300 total temples between announced and under construction and
Mhm.
operating. So, and President Hinckley brought it up a couple times, like this goal that he had. And I just wonder, and I think that it's probably significant, this number that
Mhm.
President Nelson has announced. Um, it's just, I don't know.
Yeah, the number 100.
Yeah.
And I think President Nelson is on the brink of turning 100 in the year 2024. And wouldn't that be such a cool birthday if he's, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. If he's, goes from
yeah,
being translated to resurrected, like one of the
right?
first to do
Right?
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we know no other prophet. I mean, he even has a record just with his age. I mean, there's just, I don't know. I don't know. There is something though about that number 100, like a whole century 100. I've pondered it before. Have you had any thoughts about that? Just what you feel like?
Well, not necessarily with 100, but I've done this whole thing on my channel where, with the number 17 and 18, because I don't know if you've heard of this, but so President Nelson, he's the 17th prophet, right? And when you take seven, it's like 10 plus seven, and both numbers in Hebrew numerology, they both represent in their own way perfection and completion. Seven in the sense of like the creation of the world, 10 in the mathematical sense. So if you times them, then you get 70. If you add them, you get 17. And so he's the 17th president of the church. In
Mhm.
April, he announced 17 temples to complete 100, and 100 is itself is kind of a number of completion. Um, his main talk that conference, the power or spiritual momentum, I think it was called the power of spiritual momentum. The talk was 17 minutes and 17 seconds long. Um, I think there were a few other 17s that were associated with that conference. Oh yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No, I know what you're talking about. Yep.
With like his last talk, how it was 17 years after the
Mhm.
that other talk with a similar name with the same poem. So when you have so many, it starts to become less and less coincidental. And I think it was
Mhm.
actually more on the intentional side. And then this conference, it was the conference of 18, because he announced 18 temples. His talk was 18 minutes long in 31 seconds, which I was kind of thinking about that because, like, in that talk, he called on us to be the people of the second coming. And in the year 1831, that's the year that the location of New Jerusalem was revealed to Joseph Smith. So I don't know if there's a connection there, but and if you just look at the seven and the eight, it's like, seven, it's the end of a
Mhm.
cycle, it's completion, perfection. But
Mhm.
then when you move on to eight, then it's the beginning of a new cycle, which is why I
Yeah.
think the age of 8 is the year for the year of account, or the age of accountability. I tend to think that there's a
Yeah,
symbolic
that's a good
reason for
point.
that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So
I never thought about that.
so in this case, it's like the 7 would be almost like, well, we're
Yeah.
done with this period of the Earth's history, and we're moving on to 8. Like
Hence this, yeah.
it's
You
the
think of the
millennium
seven
now.
seals and yeah. That's really interesting. That reminded me that it's 2024 going into 2025 is going to be the 70th Jubilee since the children of Israel received the promised land, came into the promised land. So it'll be the 70th Jubilee. And I know I did a video about this because one day I heard the Catholic Church was planning this huge Jubilee. And I was like, what is this? What is this they're doing? I looked into the theme and the logo that was designed, and it was so symbolic from the logo, from the theme that's all about immigrants and gathering. And I'm like, and it goes from 2024 into 2025. And then I found the scriptures that talk about the 70th Jubilee when it's complete, right? And I'm thinking, is the world aware of this? Are people aware that this is the 70th Jubilee since the children of Israel came into the promised land? I don't hear anyone talking about it. And it kind of just came across my mind. I looked into it and I was like, how have I not heard of this? And I didn't even understand the significance of 70 until that day. I mean, quorum of the 70, I know there's a lot with 70, but that to me, I don't know how I missed that in the scriptures. But again, it just goes to show that, yeah, we've crossed that hinge point and things are about to happen. So
Yeah.
amazing.
You just have to wonder, because like the way that Sister Nelson was talking, it's almost like she was almost implying that this was like the most real attempt, or the furthest that the adversary had ever gotten to almost stopping conference or stopping speakers
Mm-hmm.
from speaking. And so if that happened this time, what's going to happen next time? And again, is there going to be a
Exactly.
next time? Because for all we know, maybe it'll happen. uh
Yeah. Or well, I'll be through Zoom. Or
yeah. So
I,
I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. I was thinking about too how we were just talking about things in pop culture and things like that you just kind of pay attention to. Um, I I realized earlier this year, as far as like Chinese culture, 2024 is the year of the dragon. And next year we're going to be studying the New Testament. We're going to be studying Revelation. We're going to be studying about the dragon. And I just kind of felt it in that moment, like, that's the year of the dragon. We know who the dragon is. That's his year. What has he got planned? Like, what's in the works? What's in the plans? What are his last ditch attempts to build his kingdom, right? It's crazy to think about that, but I can see why. I can see why we have to be ready, because we've this is it, because those things are about to. It just feels like those things are about to unfold, and this is what we've waited for all of these centuries, right? This is what we read about, we study about, and it's like it's really surreal to think that this is actually happening in our lifetime, that it's happening in our day. And some days you either pinch yourself or you dismiss it. You're like, nah, maybe not. Maybe not. But yeah, it's crazy. And it's easy to get caught up in what the adversary's doing and get distracted. And I always have to tell my kids, because we talk about things that happen all the time at their schools and things that are going on in the news. And it's, yeah, those things are happening. Yeah, they're not pleasant. But look over here. Look over to that tree, right? The tree of life. That's amazing. And there's all these wonderful things that are happening, like President Nelson said, we're about to see the most incredible miracles that are going to surpass the miracles of the Old Testament. That's going to be in our day. That's what he's seeing around the corner right now, and we should have reason to be excited because we get to be a part of that. No
Mhm.
matter which side of the veil you're on, you're going to be a part of that, and it's awesome. So
And I have to wonder if there was anything to it when he said that in coming days, instead of just
mhm.
like in the near future, coming months, within, I don't know, some other alternative phrase that could be
Yeah.
looking into it too close. But he did say, I know that he's careful with his words. He said in coming days, because he said a similar phrase back in 2018, that between now and when Christ comes again, he'll perform his mightiest works. So there's like these twin phrases, but now that we're closer,
Mhm.
he adds the phrase "in coming days" and kind of like almost like specifies it.
Yeah, so Sister Nelson recently said about her husband, she said, with President Nelson, when he speaks, he's not just trying to uplift you and what did she call it, like a pep talk. She said he's very careful with the words that he chooses and they mean something. You can take every word that he says to heart. It's he means what he says. It's not just like, oh, that was a nice choice of words. So when he said that, when he used the word days, he's telling us days. Days are days that you can count.
Yeah.
It's you think of days, you think of less than a year. Otherwise, you're
Yeah.
gonna call it years, right? Or months. So yeah.
Well, let
So
me ask you this. Okay, because I had a subscriber send me an email, I talked to her on the phone. She, because like as part of that, as part of like his the mightiest manifestations of his power, or however it's worded, he also includes that us, the faithful, would have privileges and blessings and miracles. And so this subscriber, she told me this story of essentially how, uh, to make a long story short, how they had a very unlikely family reunion. Like it was, it was like all odds were against it, all of them being able to show up, but it happened, and it seemed to have significance that the family was together. And some of the families not members of the church, and she felt that they kind of went away feeling the spirit and maybe getting a little bit closer to the church. Um, and so for her, that was like one of those miracles. And I've had my own, it's a little bit more personal, so I can't really share it. And there may be more, but have you noticed anything like that personally, anything that you can share, or like have any of your subscribers like talked about this at all? And if not, then that's
about
okay.
oh no,
Okay.
no, you're good. It cut out a little bit. So about miracles, like recent big miracles.
Yeah, yeah. Just like how he talked about how we would have the faithful would have
Oh yeah.
we're yeah, like have you noticed anything yourself, or um
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. um I I just did a video called, it was about miracles, and I shared a friend of mine's miracle. And I know people in my ward. I know people who have recently overcome major illnesses where they were told they were going to die. We had a few people in our ward who were on their deathbed, and we were all getting ready to say our goodbyes. And then by a miracle, they survived and now they're thriving. There's been at least 3 of those where I live, people that I know. That's huge. But then there's also the miracles that are so easy to dismiss, but they're big because we just think, oh, that was by chance, that was coincidence, right? And one of those, I shared a story. My friend, she shared it in her own words on my channel, but it was a story about how they needed a car really bad. And it was during the time of year this year when it was really hard to get car parts, like the chips, right? Nothing was coming in, and it was impossible to get a car, let alone a used car, not even a new car. And they were in need of 2 cars. And they had to, where they live, they're homesteaders, and they have to drive quite a ways to get to a car dealership. And it was a lot of sacrifice, and they didn't even know if they were going to find a car at this small tiny dealership that was like an hour away. And by a miracle, everything fell into place. They were able to get both cars, and not only get the cars that they needed, but 10 times better than what they ever even hoped for or were expecting. Like these cars that were in mint condition, like they'd never been used, but for a used car price, right? And then because they were buying 2, the dealership gave them a huge discount. And then all these benefits and bonuses just kept happening that whole week pertaining to those cars. And she recognized that was a huge miracle, and I'm going to share it because I'm so grateful. And that's the thing too, is when you do have those experiences, you do want to share them because you want to recognize that they came from the Lord. And you find that when you recognize him in those miracles, you experience more blessings. But at the same time, you realize, well, there's some miracles that are more personal, so I'm not going to share. But then there's others, like the car story, where you have no problem sharing, especially knowing that it's going to build others' testimonies, to even pray and ask. And I've noticed in my own life, I won't share details, but I started out that video by saying this last week, even, excuse me, it started with the last fast Sunday. I said to myself, I'm really gonna take to heart what I'm fasting for this time. Not that I never do, but I really wanted to write it down in like a journal and ponder it. So I wrote down the things that I was fasting for. And not even 24 hours later, every single one of those things came to pass. I couldn't believe it. That's not even what I expected. I thought, you know what? If any of this happens the way I'm praying and hoping it will, it's going to be another month. It's going to be maybe 2 months. Everything, I had answers for everything all resolved and worked out beyond what I could have hoped for before the day was over. I couldn't believe it. It was incredible. And to me, that was a miracle. But again, I'm like, it totally makes sense because he's a God of miracles. Nothing's impossible for him. Even though it feels impossible to me, he can totally, if it's his will, he's going to do it. So
Well, it
that
makes
was
me think
huge
about
for me.
how in April General Conference, as part of his talk about spiritual momentum, one of the 5 things was to uh, not only expect miracles, but to seek for miracles. And
Mhm.
that's something that you did, and then it happened. So, um, throughout all of time, whenever you pray and you fast, like miracles can happen. But maybe right now, especially under the guidance of the prophet, maybe right now is that time that we can like really take advantage of that, because maybe it's more likely to happen right now because of the time that we're in.
Yeah,
So
that's exactly right. That's what I felt later. It was like he just told us to ask for them, and I did. So we should be asking for more. We should be on our knees more asking instead of just enduring what's happening in our lives. We should at least ask. We should talk to the Lord about it and ask him to help us. I think sometimes we use that as a last resort. We're like, well, he expects me to do my part, so I'm going to do all that I can on my own, and then if it's not resolved, I'll take it to the Lord. Then I'll take it to him, right? But that's not what he wants. He wants to be included every step of the way. So right when we're faced with a problem, even if it's not a problem, even if it's just something we're hoping for, we should talk to him about it immediately and let him guide us in that process. We're still going to do the work, we're still going to put forth effort, but we've included him and he's a part of it. He's steering the ship. And I think it just felt like he was so happy and excited that I actually asked him, because I feel like those things that I fasted for normally would be things where I'm like, well, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. It'll just happen. Like if it's the Lord's will, he'll take it in that direction. It's so trivial. I'm not even going to waste his time with it, right? But he was actually really excited that even trivial things, I brought to the table. I gave it to him, and then he did something awesome with it. And I felt kind of that excitement, like he was excited to do that for me, and I felt so grateful. And I'm so surprised that it took me so long to even ask for that. And now that I saw how amazing that experience was, I want to do it more often. So, yeah.
yeah, yeah, that would probably be a very good idea for all of us. And as I'm thinking about your friends that are the homesteaders, the fact that they got those nice cars, like I'm not one to like really look to the future with a feeling of doom and gloom. I feel like within the LDS Second Coming community, there are a portion of people that like really expect things to be really bad, and I don't doubt that they can be, but I think that if we're living righteously, doing our best, seeking for miracles, that it's probably not going to be as bad as you think, and you may not even experience what you're expecting. And so with them, I just wonder, there's probably a reason why they got such nice cars that are in such good condition. Maybe they'll use them, maybe not necessarily for doom and gloom reasons, like, oh no, there's going to be a civil war and they're going to have to drive to wherever and have good transport. But it'd be interesting to see what the outcome of that is, and if there was more than just like, oh, here's a nice car, like, oh, you'll need this and it'll be really useful to you. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think now is a very special time.
Yeah, yeah. I know that friend of mine, the stake that she lives in, the area they live in, there's a huge emphasis on homesteading. And they've been told that there will be a time when they bring in a lot of refugees to that area. And so it's been important for them to all learn how to raise livestock and grow food and learn all these skills. There's been like whole courses taught on it. It's been a theme of a lot of their state conferences, and I think that's amazing. So
Yeah,
they live in Missouri, by the way.
they live in
So
Missouri.
yeah.
Oh wow.
So she showed me once this PDF. brochure, something that their stake put together just for their stake about prophecies about that area and pertaining to like kind of what their goals and mission is right now for the people in their stake. And I was blown away. I was like, I always have loved living in Utah, but man, Missouri's where it's at.
Yeah.
Some pretty awesome things going
Maybe
on
you
there.
should
So
think about moving this way. It's I'll tell you this, home prices are way, way better. That's why we moved here. I never picture myself leaving Utah. And then once we did, we went to Arizona. I was like, okay, we're not going to leave Arizona. But then we did, joined the army, was in Texas, came back to Arizona. And then there was just like nowhere that was affordable, really, as far as like buying land and having a homestead. So we ended up looking at Missouri, but then we felt good with Kansas. And then once that happened, I was like, you know what? That just brought me a lot closer to
yes.
to Missouri. And
Right?
I feel good with where we are right here. I don't really intend to, I don't think, well, I guess we'll see what happens. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's interesting. There's been a lot of people that I've talked to, both in person and like here in this area. And my subscribers, there seems to be a lot of people kind of moving this way. And I think that's being aided by the fact that home prices are so high out west. Like anywhere west of Kansas is just like, it's ridiculous. But it actually may be that way for a reason. I don't know. But
good point.
It's just so exciting.
I guess we should clarify, wherever you live is a good place to be, right?
Yes.
If we're in the stakes of Zion, no matter where they are, that's a good place to be. So
yeah. And that's another thing that like it's like this persistent kind of like idea. There's like people that think that like the entire church is going to be gathered to Missouri, based on like, just kind of these traditions of how we look at the second coming. But I've pointed out that there was an Ensign article that came out called Missouri Myths. And that's one that's addressed. It's like, no, like wherever you're at, Brazilian saints, for them, the gathering place is Brazil, so on and so forth. And it's the stake that you're by. In the early days of the church, no, you had to immigrate, but it's not like that now.
it wouldn't make sense with all the temples.
What was that?
It wouldn't make sense with all these temples all over the world, right? That we would just abandon them.
Exactly. Even so, I think some people, I'm not trying to like, put myself up, but I think some people are being guided this way because there might be just a need to kind of populate the area a little bit more, since it'll be one of the world capitals. But you should just follow the spirit, obviously, and do whatever you're prompted to do or not do. But yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's good for this one. I really appreciate your time, Lindsay. I'm really glad that I got to meet you. I think after this conversation, I think we're very like-minded. And so that's really good.
Yeah.
And I just hope
I enjoyed meeting you. You're a great person and you're doing a good work too. So I love what you're doing. I love your channel.
Thank you. So everybody, I'm just like always, I'm going to put her channel in the description box below, and it's also going to be on like the homepage of my channel where I have the featured channels. So make sure to subscribe to her. She clearly knows, in my opinion, what she's talking about, and she has the proper perspective of, the second coming and what the prophets and apostles are saying. Now, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, you're new, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it with anyone that would appreciate this conversation, and I'll talk to you guys later.